of freedom pass from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dream some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. From the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all. So with deep appreciation for the blessings of freedom that we know in this great land of ours, I'm Dr. George Simon, welcoming you to another edition of Character Matters. This is the program where we talk about what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, which is character. And it does indeed matter. It matters in all aspects of our lives. And we are in the midst, have been for some time, of a character crisis that is threatening to erode our freedoms. This is happening each and every day in various subtle ways. And so it's been my personal mission for the past 30-some years to carry the message about the importance of character and its relevance to our freedom, and to basically sound the alarm about what it is we need to do to restore and recharge those institutions in our culture that have always done a fairly good job of promoting and fostering character development in our young people, so that we can preserve our freedoms for generations to come. And toward that end, I also have written some books in sheep's clothing, understanding and dealing with manipulative people, which is an international bestseller published in 14 foreign languages, and also Character Disturbance, the Phenomenon of Our Age, which is my in-depth study on the character problem that we face, and also my book for the Christian faith community, The Judas Syndrome, which is my attempt to reach those believers about the importance of putting into action what we profess on our lips, and calling into question the solidity of faith for those who don't live it out. That's precisely what the Judas Syndrome is all about. And I also blog at manipulative-people.com. That's www.manipulative-people.com. Pretty popular blog with a lot of timely articles on dealing with disturbed characters in your life. Perhaps you've had someone in your life, maybe a co-worker, maybe a boss, Maybe you've even been in a relationship or perhaps even married to a disordered or disturbed character and know what it's like uh, to either be manipulated or otherwise exploited or abused. Uh, so this blog is meant for you as a resource. And the contributors to the blog, the commentators, always have a whole lot of extra input to give that is helpful and informative based on their own experiences. So I encourage you to check that out as well. I also write for another blog called Philosophy, Psychology, and Real Life, or make that Psychology, Philosophy, and Real Life. And its address is counseling with 2L's resource.com. That's www.counselingresource, counseling with 2L's.com. And I post articles weekly on that site as well. So I urge you, if you are struggling with a person who has a character disturbance and you're looking for help and resources to deal with your predicament, I recommend either of my books, any of my books, or a visit to my blog or the other blog that I write for, and also to tune into this program where we discuss character matters. And I invite you also to join the discussion. We have a special program tonight. We're going to talk about some of the events that have been in the news this past week. We're going to talk about the article that I have posted this past Friday on the manipulative-people.com blog, and other matters as well. But if you want to join the discussion, the number to call is 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. I'm happy to take your call. Perhaps you have a story you want to share. Perhaps you just have a question you want to ask. Perhaps you also are concerned about the events recently that underscore how important character is to not only our general welfare, but also to the preservation of our freedoms. And that's what I want to talk a little about first today. As those of you who have listened before know, and if you've paid a visit to my blog or my website, or you've gone to YouTube to see some of my videos at my YouTube channel, that's Dr. George Simon, you may have come across the anthem for the millennium, or America, My Home, as it's more popularly known. And this is an anthem that my wife and I composed at the turn of the new millennium. I was haunted by a melody playing in my head for actually a few years before I took pen to it. And the reason for that primarily is because I'd never written a musical composition before and barely knew where to start. But this tune would not leave me alone. I believe it was truly inspired. So with a lot of work and dedication, I finally got the music put together, and then collaborated with my wife on the words, and America, My Home was the product of that. And frankly, when we made the piece, we did it for our own edification. We planned to do absolutely nothing with it. I'm not even sure why I was so driven to do it. But I literally felt some kind of internal pressure to do this. At the time, I was working on a book about the interdependence between freedom and character. This is a book I still have not published. Uh, I get to it from time to time, but for various reasons, mostly health reasons, it's very difficult for me to write these days. So I've also I've just not been able to get my act together, so to speak, on this book. But when I was doing research for the book about the interrelationship between freedom and character, which is what this program is about, and what the song represents when you hear it at the beginning and the end of the program. When I was working on this book and realizing the tremendous interdependence of freedom and character, the inextricable relationship between the two, when I was doing that, this melody began to haunt me and just would not leave me alone. And because I didn't have words for it, the only thing I knew is this thing was playing in my head day and night, week after week, day after day, month after month. The only thing I knew was the subtitle, America, My Home. I knew that was going to be a key phrase in the chorus. That's it. But then, as I thought about what it is that I wanted to say, especially in this book, about the interrelationship between freedom and character, then it began to become a little bit more clear, the message that I wanted to get across. So I got some help, most notably from my wife, and we penned the words and got the song composed. And as fate would have it, the very day that I came from the recording studio with the recording that we had done, the initial pilot recording that we had done for this song, that, as I mentioned, we had no intention to even do anything with it, just to do it. On that very day, as I was coming home, strolling actually along the riverfront in my home city of Little Rock, Arkansas, with this tape in my hand, with a cassette tape of this recording, I came across a sign at a nearby hotel that was alerting members of a planning committee for our annual Memorial Day tribute on the riverfront called Riverfest. It's a festival. I came across a sign that was alerting committee members who were part of the planning committee as to where they were meeting. And on just a complete spur of the moment, wild hair, I followed the signs and knocked on the door of a conference room where these people were meeting and asked the person who answered the door if they wouldn't at least consider listening to this tape that I made, because this festival always concludes with a patriotic celebration commemorating the men and women who gave their lives in service to the country, and a fireworks display and a lot of patriotic music. And so I gave it to them and then disappeared, quite anxious because, first of all, I'd given away this tape, and it was the only thing I had. And secondly, because I'd never done anything like that before, and I thought these people are going to think I'm a wacko or a kook or something. So I came away from that not having any idea what might happen, and also believing probably that somebody would just file this thing in the circular file. Well, to my surprise, about 3 days later, I got a call from someone who said that they were going to use this piece in a big production to honor our country, and that they were touched by it. And the person who did the demo gave an onstage performance, and was backed up by the orchestral track, and it was a hit. And since then, it gained some popularity. It gained even greater popularity after the tragic attacks of 9/11, when a regional ABC affiliate television station paired the song with a video montage of the events of the week, and some other regional stations picked it up, and before long, the song had exposure, and now it's been performed all across the country in performance venues. And I want to thank personally those people who have called or emailed in the last couple of weeks. Things get a little crazy as the 4th of July approaches, with people just uncovering the song on the internet, going to Google or to YouTube and searching for new patriotic songs or great patriotic songs, or just patriotic songs about America, and then coming across one of the videos that features America, My Home, and falling in love with the song and its message, and then trying to get a hold of me for performance permissions or for background tracks or whatever for the performance tracks. And I couldn't be more edified. And to all of you who have done so in the past week, my thanks to you. Thanks for helping to get the message across. This song is just one way that I try to inspire people about what I consider to be the most important issue of our time. You know, this freedom we have is just too precious to risk losing. We are still the freest country on the planet. I know that there are other countries that cherish freedom as well. But there are far too many places on this earth that you can go where people are not free and where they are dominated by either oppressive governments or oppressive military regimes or oppressive factions, radical factions that have taken control of the social order and have imposed their version of some ideology on everyone else. There are plenty of places in the world just like that, where people do not enjoy the basic freedoms that we enjoy. And here, we are blessed to have all these freedoms. But they're under assault. They're under assault from two sources. They're under assault from without, because there are those entities that simply detest the fact that we have these freedoms. All they see is the abuse of these freedoms that some of us have done. And we have abused these freedoms. We enjoy a lot of freedom here. And there are many things that just because we can do them doesn't mean that we should do them. And some of the things that we export, some of the things that we popularize and glamorize, do not reflect our best character. And so that's what some of these folks see. They see those examples of us abusing our freedoms. And for that reason, they hate our freedom. To them, the only solution is restricting freedom. To them, the only solution, the only way to make us behave, so to speak, is to impose their strict version of an ideology upon us, to remove our choice. So we're under assault from outside, our freedoms are. Make no mistake. There are serious, serious threats. The world is a very unstable place. And there's not just one ideology out there that's deadly. There are several. It's not just Islamic radicalism. There are many extreme ideologies out there. And they're making the world an unstable place, a very unstable place. It seems like we are relegated to not learn very much from our history. Seems like we're relegated to repeat the past, repeat the mistakes of the past, because we haven't learned what we needed to learn from our history. We've been down this road before, where totalitarian, extreme regimes with radical ideologies want to dominate everyone else and see all those who don't agree with their philosophy as both subhuman and expendable. We've been down that road before. More recently, in Hitler's Germany, this whole idea of Aryan supremacy, and this whole idea that the undesirables could be useful only as experiments in bizarre medical experiments, and were completely expendable, starvable, extinguishable. We've seen this before, and we're witnessing it again. And so in that vein, I posted an article this Friday on manipulativepeople.com about the nature of bigotry and the character disturbance that usually underlies it, that almost always underlies it. And I invite you, if you've read the article, or perhaps even if you just have thoughts on the subject, or if you want to ask any other question about any of the topics we talk about on this program, to give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. Happy to take your call. But in this article on Friday that I posted, I made the point that there's a huge difference between being highly opinionated and holding those who do not have your same ideology, who don't look at the world in the same way you do, holding those people in utter contempt and as expendable. There's a big difference between being opinionated and being truly disdainful of those who don't agree with you. There's a malignant type of narcissism involved, an unhealthy sense of superiority at play. And we saw it so vividly in the events that shook Charleston. And that's why I felt compelled to write the piece that I did on Friday. You know, I wrote a piece on the nature of malignant narcissism and some of the characteristics that go along with narcissistic individuals, namely their lack of empathy capacity, their inability to really care about all people, including those who don't particularly share their beliefs. And also, I wrote about their uncanny ability to what we call compartmentalize their emotions. In other words, to wall them off, to seal them off, whenever they're about the business of doing something that they know very well society would not approve of, or that would hurt other people unnecessarily. And in addition to those two traits, malignantly narcissistic individuals have a big sense of entitlement too. They feel that because they're so special or because they're so superior, as they see it, to those whom they hold in contempt or disdain, they feel entitled to do as they please with and to those that they despise. And we saw this vividly at play with Dylann Roof, the young man who perpetrated the awful tragedy in Charleston. So I wrote about it. And it spurred a lot of discussion, sometimes very heated discussion, as articles like that are likely to do from time to time. But I felt I had to say something. I felt I had to say something for two reasons. One, because I'd heard a lot of commentary on the news about what drives a person to do these kinds of things. The racism involved, the prejudice involved, the hatred involved. But I didn't hear many folks, I didn't hear anybody at all, actually, speaking to the character issues involved and how such characters are shaped in our culture. What kinds of things promote this kind of character formation? And what can we do to turn that around? What can we do to bring this horrible age of narcissism to a close? Enough. Enough. It's going to kill us all, eventually, if unchecked. And it's going to cost us our freedoms, eventually. If, in our abuse of our freedoms, we continue to export really irresponsible behavior, not just on our government's part, on our entertainment industry's part, on our corporations' part, there's a lot of folks who basically take advantage of the freedoms that we have, take advantage of the power that we have, the economic clout that we have, and in very poor character, misuse it, engendering a lot of discord and fomenting a lot of hatred. Now, I'm not in any way providing an excuse for those who would hold themselves superior to us, and therefore consider us expendable. But I am saying that there is inevitably an effect and a cost to the fact that we sometimes abuse our freedom. And we have to stem that tide. In addition, right here at home, we enjoy so much in the way of freedom and privilege. We have so much. But in having so much, unfortunately, there are many among us who lack the character to cherish what we have, to cherish what they have, to honor certain important ideals. And as a result, we cheat each other, we betray each other, we sue each other frivolously, we demean each other, we casually hook up with one another, and then equally casually split from one another. We sometimes make babies with no real resources or no real dedication to truly caring for them and instilling in them the kinds of values that will serve them well and also serve society well. And all of this relates to character. And it all threatens our freedom. Because when we behave irresponsibly, government is tempted to try and contain our behavior, our irresponsible behavior, by imposing rules and restrictions that inevitably, every law that's passed, every regulation that's passed, inevitably impinges on our freedom. So our freedom hangs in the balance. Our forefathers knew this. They set up the whole structure of our government and our governmental systems and our Constitution. They set up the whole foundation for the country on the premise that if decent people were left alone, they would not only prosper themselves, but they would also help build prosperity for others. If decent people had freedom, they could pursue their dreams. And in the pursuit of those dreams, they could help fulfill the dreams of one another. That was the idea. And it works when we're true to those principles. But when we act in our own interest and without character, self-interest in and of itself is not bad. But without principle, it's always got bad consequences. There has to be principle. And the principle has to be more than just me. So that's why I felt compelled to write the article and to point to the fact that this young man in Charleston who did this despicable thing showed all the hallmarks of this malignant kind of narcissism. Bigoted, yes. Racist, yes. But what's underneath that? What's underneath that is a sense of superiority and a disdain for others that rises to a pathological level. And, as I mentioned before, with the characteristics of malignant narcissism, the lack of empathy, the capacity to compartmentalize emotions, including empathy, and the sense of entitlement to do as you please in complete disregard of the rights and needs of others. This was all there with this man, and it was illustrated most poignantly in one of the statements that he gave to police. He told police that for a minute or two, he had seriously thought about not carrying out his plan. You see, he went to this church's Bible study group with a plan. I mean, he was certainly an odd duck to begin with, just coming into the place. But as this church followed the way that Jesus taught them to follow, their doors were open to anyone that wanted to come and hear and share the word. So they opened their doors to him, and he came in. They could not read his intentions. They were cloaked. And he sat and visited and observed. Maybe participated, we don't know. And he said that because the people were, quote, so nice, end quote, and nice to him, that for a minute or two, this dastardly plan that he had to kill as many people as he could in hopes of starting a race war, so that even more innocent people of color might be killed. This was his purpose. But he seriously thought for a moment or two that he might not go through with it because these people were so nice to him. But, as is classic for a person with this kind of character disturbance, I have a call coming in. I'm going to go ahead and take it. Hello and welcome to Character Matters.
Hi, is this Dr. Simon?
It is.
Hey, how are you? I'm listening to your show, and I have a question.
Sure.
My question is that can a disturbed character actually feel genuine remorse and shame, but still commit an unconscionable act? So do they actually willfully dismiss their conscience? Is it that they're good at cutting their own brake line, so to speak?
So let me make sure I understand your question correctly. You're asking if a person can have genuine remorse or contrition for an act and still do the unspeakable?
Yes.
Are you meaning before the fact or after the fact?
Um, I'm saying probably during the fact, actually, knowing that they're doing something wrong, knowing that society frowns on what they're about to do, maybe even feeling bad about doing it, but still committing the act to kind of get
Yeah.
get to their goal.
Let's talk about that for a minute. I can see a circumstance, for example, where a person of some fairly decent integrity and conscience would do something even he or she finds abhorrent normally and with regret,
Mhm.
but might feel compelled to do. For example, there might be a situation where you're witnessing a horrible crime taking place. And although you yourself don't believe in the taking of another human life, although it would unnerve you greatly uh, to even think of yourself as the person who might be an instrument by which somebody else's life might be ended, in your perception, the only way to save this person from a fate worse than death, or perhaps even death itself, is to do harm to the perpetrator. And you might, I mean, your intentions are pure in the sense that all you want to do is save this other party, right?
Mhm.
But you still might have regret and even deep remorse for the fact that you had to act in that particular manner at that time. So I can see that it's possible. Is this the kind of circumstance you're thinking of?
Well, I'm actually thinking more about the tragedy that happened in Charleston. For somebody to be able to commit an act like that, because I would think that even the worst of people, I would think there's got to be something in them that tells them that what they're about to do is wrong, it's unconscionable.
Right.
But they obviously, don't have the brakes to actually not do that. And I'm
It's
wondering.
now in this young man's case, it's obviously more, and I say obviously because we have his own words telling us. It's more than just not having the brakes. There are a lot of folks who unfortunately don't have the brakes, sometimes as the result of some kind of mental illness. Other times it's a matter of character weakness as well. Um, but in this guy's case, just as he said, it was more than not having the brakes. He let his sense of entitlement and his sense of superiority trump that. He truly do believe in the inferiority of the people he wanted to take out. And he also believed that he could be instrumental in starting a war between those he viewed as inferior and those he viewed as superior. So this is a truly malignant cognitive distortion of the ninth order. And while it might be possible, uh, and it's always possible, how likely it is, we don't know. While it might be possible for him to have some kind of change of heart and eventually
Mhm.
come to see the error of those ways and to have, therefore, some remorse for what he did, I can't be the judge of that. I have seen cases of it, but they have been few and far between. And I've also seen, unfortunately, too many cases where people will profess their sorrow, they'll profess their regret or their remorse, and it's superficial at best. I have some articles. I don't know if you've had a chance to read them. Have you read any of the articles on my blog on regret, remorse, and contrition?
I have actually. I have. Those were very interesting.
Uh-huh. What did you have any uh, questions out of those or anything like that?
Well, when it comes to contrition, I think what you were saying is it almost necessarily has to have an element of shame. Am I correct to say that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And that's been much maligned recently. Only very recently have researchers and clinicians begun to change their mind. Thank goodness. I mean, it just really riled me to read for almost 30 years consistently in the literature, researchers with a bias, clearly, but in peer-reviewed articles, you don't get opposing views published very easily. But the research was pretty solidly saying that shame is just plain bad. That to feel bad about yourself as a person is just not healthy. Guilt is okay. Feeling bad about what you did that was wrong or that hurt somebody else, that's okay. But feeling bad about you and who you are, that's just never good. Well, I got to tell you, this is something I realized long ago in my clinical research on character disturbance. Not one person, not one, that I ever came across or treated in my entire professional career, not one person with a serious character disturbance ever had a change of heart because they felt bad about what they did. I know people, for example, abusers who would beat the living daylights out of their partners and who felt bad about it after the fact each time. But it never stopped them from doing it again. What caused the change of heart in any of these folks, no matter what their serious character disturbance was when they could no longer look at themselves in the mirror, when they could no longer stand the person that they had allowed themselves to become, when their shame was great enough to be constructive, where it was either, and I'll get very brutally blunt about this, when it was either change or die, then everything began to change. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So would you say someone that hasn't reached, they might have some regret and some remorse and some guilt, but if they haven't reached contrition, could you pretty much say that maybe they don't have enough shame about themselves?
Absolutely. And that's the reason I wrote those series of articles. That series is all about that. Regret, the word regret has a meaning. It has something to do with, like, a friend of yours asks you to come to a ball game with them, or a couple that invites you over to dinner, and you've got another engagement and you can't go, right? Mm-hmm. Well, so you have a regret, but it's because of the impact that not doing so would have either on you or the other person in the way of a disappointment. It's not like you're sorry for hurting anybody. Remorse is a little beyond that, but contrition. The word actually comes from a Latin word which means a crushing of the soul. It means that I'm decimated because of the evil that I've done. In other words, I am now hurting because of the hurt that I have caused. It's really bothering me. And in order to restore any kind of dignity to myself, I must be a better person. And that requires work. The contrite person goes to work repairing damage that they've done. They want to make amends. They want to do better. They want to be better. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And in your experience, have you met any patients that they just won't let themselves get to that point?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. They have too much pride that interferes with any healthy shame developing. That's exactly right.
I see.
Yeah.
And I also have a question about the concept of giving assent. From what I can gather from your literature, giving assent is it's almost like only specific to the situation. So if someone was in a counseling with you, and they give a cent just to get you off of their back.
Right.
That would be a very specific to that session. But could someone do that over time because it's getting them something?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. And the only way you can tell over time whether somebody is really committing themselves to doing anything differently is in their behavior over time. It's one thing to give lip service, as they say in the 12-step programs. It's one thing to talk the talk. That's kind of what assent is all about sometimes. It's another thing to walk the walk and to demonstrate with one's actions consistently that what one really means to do differently. Yeah.
And also, have you experienced any patients that have started to show improvement in their personality, in their behavior, only to after a certain period of time just go back to how they were before and just
that's a really great question. Yes, unfortunately I have, and for two reasons. One, people can be great fakes. They can be all about the business of impression management. They might have a hidden agenda. They might just want to look good and manipulate you and have no real intention to change. And so it can show up in that way. But also, we're human and we're creatures of habit. And so even people who are beginning to make changes can have relapses or reversions along the way and fall back into bad habits. So I don't necessarily give up hope just because someone has reverted, but you have to look at the broad picture and see how committed they are to reversing course once again.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Well, thank you. Yeah, that makes absolute sense. That makes absolute sense.
Are you asking these questions from personal experience, or do you have a situation that you're trying to understand?
I'm happy. It's both. I have a situation that I'm trying to understand.
Uh-huh.
I'm recently divorced, and when I met my ex-wife 2 years ago, she was she took on my faith. She seemed to truly regretted her life prior to us being together, and she made a lot of changes, and she started treating people nicely with respect, and she started looking out for more than just herself. But then recently she just kind of reverted. She just went back to doing all the things that she used to do. She was doing drugs and some other types of things, and it really just from one day it seemed like she went from
right.
a considerate, kind, and loving person to this self-centered and entitled and
right.
abusive life. And,
right. So the question would be then one of two issues. The question would be, to what extent was she really buying in to a new life, to a new set of principles to abide by, et cetera, et cetera? To what extent was she doing that? Because perhaps she wasn't really buying in as deeply as you thought, or perhaps she was. Perhaps she was sincerely buying in, but old habits were too strong, and they were still too rewarding for her, and she hadn't yet hit the kind of emotional bottom that she would need to hit to really be ready to part with those old ways once and for all and adopt a new way of living. And you really can't tell, I'm sorry to say. It's impossible to judge those situations. It's easy to judge them in retrospect, in hindsight, but you never really can tell. But it's always going to be one of those two things. It's either going to be the buy-in wasn't as strong as maybe you thought it was. Maybe they were just going through the motions. Maybe they were getting enough out of this new way of doing things that it was giving them some satisfaction, and maybe that was genuine. And so they were saying all the right things, doing the right things, but they hadn't really in their heart parted company with those old devils, so to speak. Um, or the lure was still just too strong. And they hadn't yet hit the kind of bottom necessary for them to basically turn themselves over to a new way. You don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because she actually, when she adopted my faith, she adopted the higher power, and we started going to church together, and she was reading her Bible and praying, and so she was doing all the things, but I don't know if it was just too hard for her, or temptation got to be too strong for her.
Well, the other thing with that is,
it seems like she just kind of gave up.
I will suggest one other thing too. Sometimes folks who haven't yet reckoned with their demons sufficiently internally, sometimes they respond very well when that structure is imposed on them. In other words, when they find a structure that has certain appeal, they find a faith, they find a community, that maybe they enter a relationship where they're getting something they never had before, and the structure provides them with an opportunity for growth that they've never had before. But here's the problem. While they're still dependent on the structure to keep on the straight and narrow, when their heart has not yet been converted, there's always risk. There's always risk. And then there's always the temptation. So, I'm a genuine believer. As you know, the whole premise, you may or may not know, the whole premise of my book, The Judas Syndrome, is that faith does really have the power to save us.
Yes.
But the faith only comes by a genuine internal leap of the heart. It's not the structure that does it for us. It's what goes on inside of us. And that has to be for real. We have to give ourselves away. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense, actually. So, from what you just said, maybe she was really just kind of white knuckling it on her own, and she really hadn't given her heart over to a higher power, to God.
Well, I surely thank you for the call. Some great questions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Simon. Have a great evening.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Well, we have just a few more minutes to the program. I want to thank the caller again. I urge you folks, I want to mention just one other time that I felt really compelled to make this post on the tragedy. Visit my blog at manipulative-people.com. Read the article if you don't mind. And also to you folks out there who value our freedoms and who take our ideals seriously, I ask you, go to YouTube, listen to the song, America My Home, be inspired by it. If you have a mind to be one of the performers, contact me. I'm happy to provide you with performance tracks or the music. Help carry the message. This freedom of ours is way too important. It is our best chance for prosperity on earth. We need to protect it with everything we have, but it all hinges on character. Without character, without us being true to our very best ideals, we run the risk of losing everything that it's taken the sacrifice of so many to build. And so we don't want to do that. We want to preserve for generations to come this great freedom that we enjoy. And I encourage you to go to YouTube, check out the videos, and join me again next weekend for another Character Matters, and we'll talk about some patriotic matters once again. Good night. I'm Dr. George Simon.